It must rank as one of the most astonishing comments ever made by a police officer in the UK. Today, the head of the police in Scotland admitted that his force was institutionally racist and sexist.
The institutional racism, sexism, misogyny and discrimination exist.
After the revelations about the Metropolitan Police and many of the fire services up and down the country, it is another reputational hammer blow.
Are there racists and sexists in police Scotland?
There might be.
What are you going to do about it?
We are going to take a whole series of actions and activities, but the starting point is a recognition that there is a problem.
Peter has done his best tonight to press for answers, but it was a simply staggering admission. Also on News at 10. Downing Street locked down as a car is driven into the railings. Exclusive pictures show a man being led away from the scene. If the Tories once promised immigration would be in the tens of thousands, it today topped 600,000. Detectives investigating Madeleine McCann's disappearance say they did find evidence in their search near a reservoir in Portugal.
All right, sorry about that. We are kind of melting the servers.
Houston, we have a problem. DeSantis' bid for the presidency gets off to a very wonky start, and he died alone, but was today buried a hero after coming halfway across the world to fight for king and country.
To give up everything that you know and to come so far away and to do what they did.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. By any measure, it was a startling admission that makes you wonder what century we are living in. The Chief Constable of Police Scotland, the second biggest police service in the country, has admitted that his force is not only institutionally racist, but sexist, misogynistic and discriminatory too. It's the kind of candour many have been demanding from the leaders of the Metropolitan Police in London after an endless series of bombshell revelations. But in Scotland, Sir Ian Livingstone said it is only by admitting such attitudes exist that they can be challenged. This, he said, could allow the police service to ultimately lead change in society. But former officers and members of the public who've been on the receiving end of such discrimination say Sir Ian has had plenty of time to address these issues and is only mentioning them now because he's about to leave the force.
Police are supposed to be pillars of our community. But what happens when those meant to protect us become part of the problem? Too often victims of police discrimination have said there is no accountability, no admission of wrongdoing. But today, the Chief Constable of the UK's second biggest police force decided to confess to something no head of police in this country has ever admitted before.
Institutional racism, sexism, misogyny and discrimination exist. Police Scotland is institutionally racist and discriminatory.
Others, like the Met Police Commissioner, have consistently rejected the term institutional racism and sexism. Sir Ian Livingstone has gone further today, so I asked him, why now?
Do you know about significant cases of racism in the police, sexism, sexual violence in Police Scotland that are going to come out?
That's a different matter.
But do you know
that's a different matter. But I need to be really clear. When I'm saying the organisation is institutionally discriminatory, I'm not saying there's any tolerance for sexism, misogyny or poor behaviour. These people should not be in policing, whether as police officers or police staff.
I guess the question is,
are they? Well, they might be.
Are there racists and sexists in Police Scotland?
There might be.
What are you going to do about it?
We are going to take a whole series of actions and activities, but the starting point is a recognition that there is a problem. We are not alone in this. Other organisations should look to themselves. Dare I say it, media outlets.
Other police organisations?
Any organisation.
The Met Police?
Any organisation.
Should Sir Mark Rowley be saying the same thing?
It's not a matter for me to give Sir Mark any advice.
Rona Malone quit her job in Police Scotland because of misogynistic abuse. She says she has heard other allegations of sexism and bullying.
My life was destroyed. The other women's lives were destroyed. They had an opportunity there to put a stop to that. You know, Chief Constable Ian Livingston knew years ago there was a problem and he didn't do anything about it.
Listening to the announcement was Amar Anwar. In 1991, he was a victim of a racist attack at the hands of police officers in Glasgow. Now a human rights lawyer, he spent the last 3 decades fighting for the admission he heard today.
Having my teeth smashed out, being kicked, being told this is what happens to black boys with big mouths. Becoming a lawyer as a result of that, in case after case, struggle after struggle, always having to prove that racism exists. Today, we have known for years, the black and the Asian communities have always known institutional racism exists. Today is important because on one level, it is vindication.
Police Scotland's Chief Constable is retiring from the job in a matter of months. His parting shot puts pressure on police across the country to examine if they too have a problem.
And Peter joins us now. I mean, Peter, I don't really know where to start with this. I mean, an utterly startling admission from the Chief Constable. But I mean, where's he been? He's been in charge of the force. Who does he blame, if not himself, for this situation that he says exists within the force he's been leading?
Well, that's something I did put to him, Tom. I said, you know, is this convenient that you're just about to retire from the job? Can you look yourself in the eye and say that on your watch you have held racists and sexist officers to account? He says, yes, absolutely, but it's an ongoing battle. But it's important to create this distinction. The language here is really, really crucial. Yes, this is an astonishing admission from the Chief of Police, the Chief Constable for Police Scotland. None of his contemporaries have gone this far. But when he talks about institutional racism, he says Police Scotland is institutionally racist and sexist, but police officers in Scotland are not racist and sexist. And he is standing by his officers, saying he's proud of the work they do. What he's referring to about the institutional racism and sexism and discrimination is examples he gave, things like body armour not being designed with female officers in mind, or women being discriminated against when they come back from maternity leave, or officers of colour who are facing cultural barriers in the force. That's still a long way from what many people believe is the core of the problem when we talk about racism, sexism, discrimination. People are suffering bullying. The family of Sheku Bayo, a black man in Scotland who died after injuries he sustained during arrest, an ongoing inquiry into that death, but his family believe it was race-related, and they would like to see this go further. Now, when I put this to Police Scotland's Chief Constable today, he said, yes, look, when history looks back on this, we will see that this was the beginning. It's not the answer, it's not the end of all the problems, but it is the catalyst for change that is long overdue, and others in every sector, in every part of our society, need to ask if they too are taking this big step and if they are doing enough. I think that with many people who have been following events in policing across the country, they will be knowing what he has in mind. They'll be knowing that the Met Police's mind, and that there are significant questions being asked and a long way yet to go, Tom.
OK, Peter, thank you very much indeed. Well, for a few tense moments this afternoon, police in central London were on high alert. There was alarm around Downing Street. Out of nowhere, a car crashed into the metal gates that protect the entrance to the street. The Prime Minister was inside number 10. The bomb squad and sniffer dogs were quickly on the scene. But within a few minutes, calm was restored. No one had been hurt. The driver was arrested by armed officers, and local, not anti-terrorism police took over the investigation.
It could have been a truly frightening moment, a silver hatchback driving towards Downing Street. These BBC pictures show it passing the cenotaph, crashing straight into the main security gates. Armed police by the entrance cleared the street, and a man was arrested at the scene. These exclusive ITV News pictures show the moment officers took him away on suspicion of criminal damage and dangerous driving.
Well, a car hit the gates. The police were seen to, didn't take long to jump on him, pointed a taser at him, dragged him out, and then there was a load of police shut down the area, maybe like 12, 15 vehicles, and then sniffer dogs were here, bomb disposal unit was here, but there was no bomb.
The Prime Minister was inside number 10 when the incident happened. Not long after, 2 Range Rovers were seen exiting the rear entrance to Downing Street with a police escort. Staff inside the building and the Cabinet Office were told to remain inside their offices as a major security operation swung into action as police secured the scene and forensics started their investigation. It wasn't too long after that the police cordon, which was in place, stopping traffic moving in both directions here, was eventually reduced and just limited to the front of this area. But it is significantly calmer here now than it was earlier. By the evening, a police tow truck arrived to remove the car from the gates. Barely damaged because it wasn't moving particularly fast. The good news, there are no reports of any injuries, and now the investigation will go on to figure out what happened and why. Shihab Khan, News at 10, Westminster.
What a very strange episode. Now, earlier in the day, the Prime Minister went on television to insist he was committed to bringing down immigration after the latest figures showed it had reached record-breaking levels. If there is any consolation for a political party that has repeatedly made that promise, it is only that today's numbers weren't as high as the leaks had forecast. Net migration for 2022 was 606,000. That's more than 100,000 up on the year before.
It is a promise you will have heard.
Net migration to this country will be in the order of tens of thousands each year.
Again.
We do want to bring net migration down to sustainable levels.
And again.
And we will have a system that is finally subject to proper democratic control.
13 years and 5 Conservative Prime Ministers later, they're still saying it, but with a bit less confidence.
Numbers are too high. It's as simple as that, and I want to bring them down. And that's why this week we announced some new measures, and I think pretty much the biggest thing that anyone's ever announced to bring the levels of migration down, and it's a new policy which limits the amount of family members that people who are studying here can bring with them when they come and study here.
When the Tories regained power in 2010, net migration was 256,000. After a dip because of the pandemic, numbers hit an all-time high of almost 500,000 in 2021. Today's 606,000 breaks that record. The numbers include 1.2 million people arriving in Britain and 557,000 leaving. The biggest group to come, 400,000, were international students, with universities selling themselves at fairs like this one in India. There was also a big rise in humanitarian visas, 172,000, including many Ukrainians fleeing war, like here in Reading. And then 172,000 came to work, including women like Clara and Rejoice, who travelled to Peterborough to fill gaps in health and social care.
It's quite simple. Without migrant workers, we would not be able to function. Nearly 50% of our staff come from overseas.
In Parliament, Labour criticised the government for failing to train up enough British workers.
Today's extraordinary figures, including doubling the number of work visas since the pandemic, show that the Conservatives have no plan and no grip on immigration.
Sources in the Home Office had suggested that net migration would cross 700,000, which you might say is good expectation management, because while we've seen record figures today, they are quite a lot lower than expected. But still, Tories heading to their constituencies were worried, like the MP here in Penistone and Stocksbridge, who fears the numbers will damage trust.
When people voted for Brexit in 2016 and when they voted for us, the Conservative Party, in 2019, the expectation and indeed our promise was to bring down the numbers of net migration, and actually they've gone up.
Her South Yorkshire constituents told us they worried about resources. Take house building targets that assume net migration of just 170,000.
I do think it needs to be controlled more, because there's so many people in this country can't get housing.
We came out of Europe because of immigration problem, and to me it's got worse.
The Prime Minister thinks people are more concerned about illegal migrants, including those coming on small boats, again today. A change in recording means they are now included in the net migration figures if they have claimed asylum, something they will no longer be able to do under a planned government crackdown. Anushka Astana, News at 10.
The 3-day search around a remote reservoir in Portugal, 30 miles from where Madeleine McCann went missing, has turned up some evidence. Exactly what police have found in a selection of soil samples will now be analysed in a laboratory in Germany. But the search does seem to be over. Police tents and streamers have been packed away.
After 3 days, an end to the intensive searches around the Arade reservoir. German, Portuguese and British officers packing up and leaving their command post. This phase of the investigation into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann now at an end. The focus will now shift to the analysis of what they found in this remote part of the Algarve. The work they've done here is carved into the landscape. Trees felled, vegetation torn away, and the ground bored into. This was the same area at the start of the week. It had to be extensively cleared for the teams to target the areas they believed to be of importance. Much of the work of the last few days has been focused around the edge of this reservoir and also in two specific sites further into the undergrowth. This is one of those places. It's incredibly remote. Earlier in the week it was full of vegetation. The search teams have cut it down and have worked all the way back here taking soil samples. Those soil samples have now been sent to Germany where they'll be forensically tested. The aim of that is basically to establish whether there is any connection between this area, Madeleine McCann, or Christian Bruckner. The search was only meant to last 2 days. In the end, it ran into 3. The teams came here as a result of a tip-off relating to Christian Bruckner, the man prosecutors in Germany believe abducted and killed Madeleine McCann. Bruckner, a child sex offender, was living in Praia-da-Luz when Madeleine disappeared. Phone records place him close to a holiday apartment shortly before she went missing, and it's known he spent time in his camper van close to the site of the latest search. This year marks Madeleine's 20th birthday. All these years on, her image has endured, as have the questions as to what happened to her. The work done in Portugal this week has sought to take the investigation closer to answers. Emma Murphy, News at 10, in the Algarve.
Now to Ukraine, where one of President Zelensky's closest advisors has said that the much-talked-about counter-offensive against the Russian invaders has actually begun. The head of the presidential office said it started a few days ago. It was, he said, never going to begin at a specific time on a specific day with the cutting of a red ribbon. Meanwhile, the head of the private army that has been fighting on behalf of Russia for the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut is pulling out his troops and leaving regular Russian forces to take up their positions.
Ukraine and their soldiers remain defiant, and they insist undefeated still in Bakhmut, scene of the bloodiest fighting of the war. Russia returned the bodies of foreign volunteers and Ukrainian prisoners from the battlefield, as Yevgeny Prigozhin, who commands the mercenary forces who claim control of the city, announced he would withdraw his troops and hand over to the regular Russian army. But he made a point again of taunting the military command in Moscow. If the army can't cope, the Wagner leader said, I'll leave 2 of my men behind to help. On the northern flank of the city, Ukrainian forces fight back. We have to strike day and night to try to pierce the Russian defences, says this artillery officer. Heavy rain and muddy ground may hamper Ukraine's counter-offensive. Though according to a senior advisor to President Zelensky, it is getting underway.
The counter-offensive has already been going on for days. It is an intensive war over a 1,500 kilometers long border, but actions have already started.
What form the opening salvos are taking is shrouded in secrecy. They may well include this missile attack on a Russian ship in the Black Sea. This is the first time the Ukrainian government has said that its spring offensive is finally starting. The coming battles will be long, costly, and perhaps decisive. John Ray, News at 10, Kyiv.
After the turmoil in energy prices caused essentially by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the industry regulator has restored a little calm and lowered bills, but only a little. Ofgem has set a new price cap from the start of July at £2,074 for an average user on direct debit. That's a reduction of £400, but leaves bills still double what they were before the invasion. And they won't be coming down again anytime soon.
typical energy bills will drop by 17% in July. That's a fall of £426 on average. Many households are far from average. Anne Vivian Smith relies on hoists, and her bills tripled in 18 months. Customers will still be paying almost double 2021's costs, and for her, the energy price crisis feels far from over, despite this new price cap.
I think it's a plaster over a septic sore. I don't think it reviews how difficult people's lives are. I think the people who've made that decision are people who £2,000 means very little to them.
Rising wholesale prices meant average annual bills would have peaked at around £4,000 in January. But since October, the government's subsidised energy price guarantee has held a typical bill at £2,500. Now, from July, typical bills will fall to £2,074, signalling an end to the government's price guarantee scheme.
Today's announcement means that the average bill will fall by about 17%, yet wholesale prices have fallen more like 70% from peak. So why isn't more of that saving being passed on?
We tell the companies they need to buy energy in advance. So right now they're not buying energy for July, they're buying energy for later in the year. And they were buying this energy when prices were higher.
Today, this customer became one of more than 100,000 turning to Citizens Advice for energy help so far this year. And the head of one power firm today played down prospects of much better deals ahead.
Is there any hope that firms like yours will be able to offer deals lower than this price cap?
No, and the price cap is still very tight on our operating costs, and until we see some relief on that, it's still going to be very difficult.
Personal finance expert Martin Lewis says more fixed-rate deals are now likely.
You probably don't want to fix at much more than the July price cap prices. So if you can get a fix at the July price cap prices, it's probably a really good idea.
Worried customers are being warned that bills are unlikely to get as low as pre-2020 level before the end of the decade. Chris Choi, News at 10.
High energy prices have also hit hard in Germany and helped push the economy there into recession. Output fell again this spring for the second quarter in a row. Consumers cut back on household spending because of high inflation and so that they could afford their gas and electricity bills. Back here, British Airways flights from Heathrow were hit by what the airline called technical issues this afternoon. Around 50 had to be cancelled. BA didn't say exactly what the problem was, but it is believed to have been some IT failure. Inbound flights were also delayed for a time. Separately, security staff at the airport terminal used by British Airways began 3 days of strikes today. It was not the best possible start to a campaign to become de facto leader of the free world. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is taking on Donald Trump for the Republican nomination for president, has been trying to put behind him the chaos surrounding last night's announcement via Twitter that he wants the job. Mr. Trump has been mocking him like mad, and to get things back on track, Governor DeSantis is having to embark on 4 days of tours to the key states.
And today he announced his candidacy to be the next president of the United States.
Making light of what many felt was a disastrous launch, even Fox News couldn't resist playfully referring to the technical issues which bedeviled Ron DeSantis' big moment.
Governor DeSantis, if you broke Twitter, my daughter and the Kardashians are going to be very upset with you.
We had a huge audience. It was the biggest they'd ever had. It did break the Twitter space, and so we're really excited with the enthusiasm.
Twitter owner Elon Musk started upbeat.
It's going to be live, and let her up. Let's see what happens.
All right, sorry about that. We are kind of melting the servers.
Launching a presidential bid on an audio-only Twitter feed was a first, and now might be a last.
All right, I'd like to welcome Governor DeSantis for this historic. We're just trying to get it going.
The glitchy declaration immediately was lambasted by Republican rival Donald Trump, who likened it to a failed launch of one of Musk's rockets. President Biden joined the ribbing, tweeting out a fundraising page, archly saying, "This link works." Ron DeSantis was trying to spin it, though.
And it broke the internet because so many people were excited about being on that Twitter space. Now let's see if we can break Win Red. Please go to rondesantis.com, donate to the cause.
DeSantis trails Trump by more than 30 points in the polls. Towns like Arnold in Missouri are typical Republican-leaning communities where both men need to win over voters. Have you heard of Ron DeSantis?
Yes, I have.
What do you think of him?
Haven't decided yet. Too early.
Is he getting excitement, Ron DeSantis, or?
No, I don't see that at all. I think they feel like they're getting their rights taken away.
I haven't heard of him.
Haven't heard of him?
I don't hear news much. My husband does, but I don't.
But Ron DeSantis hasn't even made an impression on you then?
No, I don't even know him, so I couldn't say.
You can bet most voters here have never heard of Twitter Spaces and probably missed the entire event. After what happened, Ron DeSantis is probably wishing he had too.
His commitment to freedom and his willingness to put his money where his mouth is.
It's unfortunate. We've never seen this before.
Dan Rivers, News at 10 in the United States.
Bit of a disaster. Now, some football. Manchester United will be playing Champions League football again next season. A 4-1 win against Chelsea tonight. Martial got United second, secured their top four finish in the Premier League. If they win again in the final match of the season at home to Fulham, they will finish third. Finally, when wartime Flight Sergeant Peter Brown died alone last December in his flat in London, it seemed his funeral might be a rather small affair. That was, though, before his neighbours, the local council and indeed the RAF got involved. You see, Flight Sergeant Brown held a special place in the history of the Second World War. He was one of the very last airmen from the West Indies who came to Britain to fight for King and Commonwealth. So today, the RAF church in central London was packed for a send-off befitting a hero.
Even the longest journeys come to an end. And for the final few steps of Flight Sergeant Peter Brown's journey, hundreds turned out to give him a hero's farewell. And to celebrate the life of one of the last so-called pilots of the Caribbean. He was among 450 black airmen who chose to serve with the RAF during the Second World War.
It was important to pay my respects. I think it's important for people to realise the contributions people have made, because Flight Sergeant Brown would have left Jamaica as a youngster, paid his own fare, came to help the mother country. So I'm quite delighted and proud to be here today.
Originally from Jamaica, Peter enlisted with the RAF at the height of World War II after travelling to the UK, flying in Lancaster bombers, carrying out a number of missions as a radio operator and gunner. But he died alone in his flat last December. With no known family, he was destined to draw only a few mourners, until an appeal to the public to give him a send-off befitting his service to the nation.
I just thought, oh, that is so sad. You know, someone on their own who's given so much to this country. But I'm glad that I'm here today to make up for the fact that he died by himself.
A global search was also begun to trace his relatives. Long-lost cousin Rosie Bird read that appeal in a British newspaper in Canada.
I feel kind of sad that I didn't get to know him personally. I will be remembering what he and other servicemen did. To give up everything that you know and to come so far away and to do what they did.
In life, Flight Sergeant Peter Brown was modest about his bravery, but he was among the greatest of his generation, and today he was honoured by a community grateful for his service. Sejal Karia, News at 10.
It's good to see that. Now that's it for tonight. Our main story, that astonishing admission by the head of the police in Scotland that his force was institutionally racist and sexist, amongst other things. That's it. Good night. Thanks for watching.